Welcome to the Inside Podcast number 3. Yeah, number 3 already. How about that? Got a great show today lined up with Mr. Brian of the Crawford Cramps. Great lengthy interview. You guys are going to love it, promise. Looking forward to you hearing it, to your reactions, and having a good time doing this show. And I'm glad it's going well. And we're going to keep it up as long as you're listening and as long as you guys enjoy it. So appreciate the positive feedback so far. And, here we are, number 3, again, with Mike and Scotty. But first, let's rock. Hello, BDL. Welcome to the Inside Pod number 3. Mike, we are on number 3 already, my friend.
Already one more than most people thought we'd get through, so we're doing good.
This is true, including yours truly.
Me too, honestly. We're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good.
Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Yeah. So, guys, we have a really great show for you today. We just wrapped up a lengthy interview with Brian of the Cramps. A really cool story Brian has to share. His last 2 years or so on the campaign trail, and then of course, kind of looking at the current state of the Crawford Cramps, what 2021 might look like for his club, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Had a great time with this interview, Mike.
It was fun, and I think the late add-on of kind of quick thoughts on all the managers, I think everyone's going to get a kick out of those.
We'll see.
or maybe some won't.
Some might leave. We may have some vacancies soon. Matt, we need your unverified Twitter again, sir. Help us record.
Connor, you're back in again.
Oh no. Not Connor. Okay, we cannot continue to bring up Connor on this podcast. No more Connor talk.
Ern, you around, buddy?
Well, we got through 3. We might not get through 4.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So looking at just headlines this weekend, Mike, got me thinking. What would impeachment look like in the BDL?
That'll be interesting because just like the Senate, I can't imagine we get 2/3 of us to agree on anything. So,
you have a point.
That would be really hard to get someone thrown out if we had to do it via impeachments.
You have a point. Maybe we should look at that.
Yeah, you know what? It's a couple of managers in the league might be a little worried right about now.
Chris?
I think Chris will be safe.
I am not. I am not going further down this path. I'm sorry.
He'll sneak out like an 8-7 vote. He'll be okay.
just like the VI.
Yeah. He'll be all right.
Oh gosh. Good times.
And speaking of politics.
Listen, if there's one thing we're not going to do on this show, it's politics. There will be no politics on the Inside Pod. Ever. Nope. Outlawed. Nope. No politics.
Except maybe for this next 90-minute interview. Yeah, except for that.
Are you telling me we let that happen?
You know what? We might have snuck in one question.
Man.
Maybe. I do remember Brian talking about how much he loved the last president. That I know came up. That came up a little bit.
Very controversial segment. We'll probably trend on Twitter, on Brian's verified Twitter account.
Yeah.
He will reshare this pod for the world to see. But, if one thing is for sure, it's that the Cramps are unimpeachable.
Let me think about that.
You disagree?
Yeah, think about that one. Unimpeachable. Just like that lady They needed no, sorry, it wasn't a lady. Just like the other members of council that needed the dictionary that time. I really got to think about the definition of unimpeachable when I think of the cramps. Yeah,
I might have just made up that word. I'm not sure if
yeah.
it actually works. I have to analyze that. Well, whatever. Okay, guys, you're really gonna enjoy this interview with the mayor of the BDL himself, Mr. Brian of the Crawford Cramps. Really good time. Hope you enjoy it. I know you will. So let's throw to Brian now. Brian, Mr. Crampy Cramp himself, the only guy in the BDL with a verified Twitter account. Take that, Matt Eddy.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you joining the show. It's been a while, I think, since we've heard from you on any of our media shows. Of course, I guess it's been a while since we've heard from most everyone, with the exception of Zach and Alex lately. But yeah, looking forward to this. I'm glad you could make time for us today. But yeah, all kidding aside, though, I want to go down this path a little bit. You weren't always a verified Twitter kind of guy. You've been on quite the journey, these last 24 months or so to get there. So was kind of hoping we could start things off by talking about that a little bit. You have served as mayor pro tem for the city of Mills River, North Carolina, since what, 2017? Am I
2017. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm sure that in and of itself has been an experience, but setting that aside, following that run, by the fall of 2019, give or take a few months, President Trump had apparently driven you completely insane because you decided to run for state senate in North Carolina's 48th senatorial district. So, just to set the proper tone for this portion of the interview, I'd like to kick things off with a simple question: are the cramps not keeping you busy enough?
Apparently not. Yeah, I tend to jump into things head first. For sure, running for office in Mills River was kind of an outlet for some political frustration that I was feeling. And before we get into this, I just have to apologize because this is not going to be nearly as interesting as the recent K-pop conversation you guys had.
We'll
I
think of
listened to that and
something.
I
We'll
was
make
just
fun
like,
of you, Brian. Don't worry.
I was so fascinated. I'm like, what? I mean, I know my daughter's in that stuff and I don't really understand it, but wow. I mean, we have a league member who's like way into K-pop. That is just like some serious stuff. But no,
He's a huge fan. He's a huge fan, Brian.
Apparently, and somebody I think posted a picture of his supposed bedroom with all the posters around, and I just thought it was hysterical. It's really funny. But yeah, that people in the league all have different hobbies and whatever, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to go about it, I've gotten involved in politics a little bit. My decision to run in Mills River was essentially just like political frustration overall. That was right after the 2016 election. And I told Stacy, my wife, I said, I don't care if the next election is for dog catcher. I feel like I have to run for something and just try to give back to the community. It didn't help that I went to a town council meeting and there were essentially five guys sitting up at the front of the room, and none of them could figure out what it meant to take something on contingency. And I am not kidding you. I mean, you're as a member of the audience, you're not allowed to speak, and I'm just like pulling my hair. Like, really, you guys have spent 40 minutes talking about what it means, and you can't understand what it means for an attorney to take something on contingency. That's just, you couple that with an outrageous tax hike in the community, and that's reason enough to run right there.
They had to
But
buy a dictionary, apparently. That's why. That's why they have the tag site. They have to pay for the dictionary to find out what contingency meant.
I live in a very red area. It's very old school. People are very accustomed to being conservative in um, every way, shape, and form. I was actually the first Democrat to win a seat in the town of Mills River, and the town has existed since 2003. So we've had a number of councils that have been all Republican, and I'm happy to say that we've actually gotten a ton done on the council. We have added so much industrial jobs to this community, so many industrial jobs, I should say. We just recently got an Amazon distribution center. We have, of course, Sierra Nevada. They're located here in Mills River. If you ever had a Bold Rock cider, they are not only bottled in Mills River, and they have a tasting room and a facility here, but they're also made out of apples that are grown in this county. So Mills River is really growing in a very big way. We're adding tons of jobs. We have installed solar panels on every town-owned building, which in a conservative area you would think, whoa, how did you do that, right? Basically, what it comes down to is convincing those folks on the conservative side of the aisle that they're going to save money if they go with something that is also green and friendly to the environment. So we were able to do that, and people call me from all over Western North Carolina saying, okay, I'm thinking about solar panels. How on earth did you get it past your council? So, things like that. We're putting electric car chargers in our town park, doing a lot of things that I think make us really stand out. And so that led to me deciding to make a run for North Carolina State Senate. Again, I'm in a very red district. Our maps are gerrymandered. I had no thoughts that I would win, but we still raised $116,000. We forced my opponent to spend $481,000 beating me, and we damaged him very badly in the process. I mean, if I showed you guys the mailers that we sent out attacking him, he's kind of damaged goods right now. And so, when you go into something and you figure, okay, my chances of winning are slim, but let's create some opportunities and make them spend some money. And they've never had to do that in this district before. We might create some opportunities for victories elsewhere. And so I think we did that. And so I was pretty happy with the way that campaign ran.
Brian, coming from a region of the country that is very reliant on extraction industries, coal, natural gas,
Yeah,
those
right.
things. I can talk all day long about solar and those things. From being around that narrative for so
Sure.
long. Why do you think that becomes a partisan topic? That becomes a partisan issue? Conservative, liberal. I mean, it's energy. It's solar, and I know that's a very simplistic question, but it's just ludicrous to me that these things become so party line.
It is silly, right? But I mean, you can go back to Jimmy Carter installed solar panels on the roof of the White House, and the first thing Ronald Reagan did was take them off.
Yeah,
And I don't understand that concept at all because solar panels are the most passive way to collect energy. I have them on my house. Um, and I'll just say the company we used, I tell people this all the time, the company we used in Mills River to put solar panels on the town buildings had nothing to do with the company that I chose to install them on my house. There was no sweetheart deal or anything like that. We just decided that hey, it was going to increase the value of our home. It was going to decrease our electric bills going forward, and it was therefore worth the investment. But
right.
I think the municipality should be doing that too.
In my area, I live in such a mountainous region that it's difficult for solar infrastructure to really work well because not most of your buildings receive enough hours of direct sunlight every day for it to function properly. But that's a an issue that's exclusive to this area. If it can work, why not pursue it? It's renewable energy. Kind of makes sense, right? But
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
And for Mills River, I think one of the things that really makes it work is that we're in a valley, and it's a fairly broad, wide valley, susceptible to
right,
flooding quite a bit. But our solar panels get sun all day long, every day. If the sun's out, we're collecting, and that
yeah, yeah,
that defrays our energy costs by 77%. And when you tell people that, they're like, "Wait, what?" And it's like, yeah. And it also protects us against any future rate hikes because you can't really trust Duke Energy, which is the energy corporation that
yeah,
basically harvests and sells energy in our area, because they're in the pocket of the legislature, and
right.
and it's bad news.
Yeah, the south end of my house gets about 2 or 3 hours of direct sunlight per day, but of course we live in a forest, basically. So it is what it is. Uh, but so tell me this: a district-wide campaign is a obviously it's a huge time commitment across at least a year of campaigning. Give us a peek into what a single week looked like on the campaign trail. How many stops, how many miles on your car, how many babies tossed into the air, that sort of thing.
Well, I think it would be a lot worse in a normal year, but remember, we're coming out of a COVID year.
True.
So it was kind of a bizarre campaign in a lot of ways. It was a lot of Zoom calls. When we did have an event, we tried to be very respectful of people and make sure that we had lots of social distancing and we do something outside. But it was really tough to get in front of people in the same way. We did have two debates scheduled, and I basically beat my opponent around in both of those debates, rather badly. He was not expecting the kind of questions that I was asking, and I I do my research, and so I beat him pretty good. Just punched him around and had a lot of fun doing it. He wanted to schedule a third debate that would be in person and would be in front of a white audience in Hendersonville. And at the same time, he was canceling a scheduled debate in front of the NAACP. And I said, look, if you want to debate me in front of your group of white people, you've also got to debate me in front of people of color. And he wouldn't do that. So we canceled the third debate. I ended up, it's funny, our win number that we had going into this was 50,000 votes in the district. And we came a little shy of that number, but still very, very close to it. I think I had 48,000 votes, which in a normal year is enough to win this district. But the interest level on both sides was so high, that we did. My opponent did end up having a significant amount of votes more than I did. And I will say I was not all that disappointed to lose because Democrats did not take the majority in Raleigh, and Raleigh is 5 hours from here. And so being out there half the time, and being in the minority would not be fun at all. So if if you want to make lemonade out of lemons, there you go.
Sure thing. How did you how did you weave your BDL commitments into that kind of schedule last year?
uh, yeah, the BDL is basically the only league. I mean, I'm in a league with Joe and a few other members of the league as well, the Safe at Home League, and I enjoy that a lot. It's a lower profile commitment, I think, than the BDL is, just because I think that the folks in that league are a little bit more relaxed. But
Oh, you're talking about the league where Joe has to go to win a title.
yeah,
Poor
he's
Joe.
Or am I
he-
mistaken?
no, yeah, I think we've got it right. um, but
Okay,
people there it's a series league too, but it's not the same kind of dedication, I don't think, on the part of the majority of the owners, as the BDL. So it's still, even I would be checking my roster and making sure I had things set up late at night, and And it may be that being distracted, I made a trade or two I wish I had back. But other than that, I was able to keep up with it pretty well.
Well, 3 cheers for Joe and his low key championships in the whatever
He
league
was
that
so
is.
close last year, Scotty. He was so close.
Poor Joe. Poor Joe. So I worked in local news, Brian, long enough to know what a small town campaign rally looks like. I'm sure whether virtual or some of the events that you were able to get in, you have a few good stories or two from your time on the trail from those kinds of events. Can you share a couple with us?
Oh yeah, and it was interesting because when I first announced and we started um, really getting into the campaign, and I was primaried, by the way. I had a couple of younger candidates who primaried me, and so we had to run a full-on primary campaign. And primary, of course, was in March. Won that primary with 50% of the vote. The other two candidates split the remaining 50%. But you're campaigning hard, and this was pre-COVID, so you're out there getting in front of a lot of people. And there was one episode that really kind of stands out in my mind because one of the things you can do to strengthen your campaign is you can sort of make alliances with other candidates and hold joint events. And so one of my good friends is Sam Edney, and he was running for state house out here in Transylvania County, which is the next county over. And we decided that what we were going to do is we're going to have an oyster roast, and we're going to do it at a bar in Brevard and very close to the Brevard College campus. So we were trying to get students both to get involved with our campaigns and come over and drink a few beers with us and see that we're cool dudes and have some oysters and just have a good time and get interested in our campaigns. Well, this thing ran late. It happened to coincide with one of the Democratic uh, debates that was taking place at the time. And so everybody's watching on TV and drinking beer and having oysters. And as the crowd starts to thin out a little bit, there was a woman who had been there the entire night, a little bit older, and I'm talking to everybody. And she comes over to me and she says, I really like you. And I said, well, I think I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you. And she said, but there's one thing I'm really having a hard time with. And I said, okay, what's that? And she said, I, there's something about I'm finding you to be just a little bit inauthentic.
Hit the nail on that head, didn't she?
And I said, well, as somebody who has been in this community and I'm an elected official and I really think that I kind of identify with the electorate and what they want. I said, that sounds like a serious problem to me. I said, can you elaborate on that just a little bit? Because I'm concerned. And she said, well, she said, to be honest, it's your hair. And I said, what about my hair? She said, you've got this great haircut. You're wearing a coat and a tie, and your hair is just too perfect. She said, you just look a little bit too slick. And she said, I think what it comes down to is you use too much product in your hair. And so I'm standing there, and I'm kind of looking around, and I'm like, okay, so I think there's only one way for me to convince you that I don't wear product in my hair. And she says, yeah, I think that's about right. So I leaned over and I just kind of bent my head towards this woman, and she took her fingers and she ran them all through my hair, like she's like scruffing a dog's head, and then she like takes a step back and she folds her arms. She looks at me and she says, okay, you've got my vote. Because in fact, I did not have any product in my hair. It was just one of those things you're just like, okay, did I just actually let that person do that?
And 2 weeks later, that person died of COVID, sadly.
I know. Probably true. Who knows? I mean, she was
Oh
elderly, but
no.
I was really just like, you have to be kidding me. I mean, the of all the things you have to do on the campaign trail, you have to give speeches, you have to shake hands, you have to talk to a lot of people that have gotcha questions, or you can tell clearly are Republican plants, and they're coming and tape recording you, and all this kind of thing. They're definitely working for the opposition, but this woman was just very concerned about my hair, and that was it.
Priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. The oyster roast was a great success otherwise.
Tell us about it.
Well, one of the good things about Western North Carolina, I think it's getting to be this way pretty much everywhere, is we have great beer. I mean, we have clean water, we have mountains, we've got great beer. And so anytime you can hold an event at a brewery, people are going to show up. And that's one of my takeaways from the primary campaign and the general election campaign is hold your events at breweries, and you're going to get a whole lot more people than you would otherwise.
We have more and more of those popping up around here too.
Yeah, I think it's great for the economy. Let's face it. I mean, like I'll go down to Sierra Nevada a lot of times and just sit down and have a beer. It tastes so much different and so much better than if you bought a bottle of the same beer and had it ice cold or what have you. I mean, there's just no difference. I mean, I'm sorry. There's just you can't compare the two. It's just crazy.
So, Brian, as you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, you ran on the blue ticket in a predominantly red part of the country. In fact, I think only one far western county in North Carolina was captured by the Biden-Harris ticket last fall. Um, I have to say, in my neck of the woods, the party that usually swims upstream, usually puts forth nothing more than a sacrificial lamb in these elections.
Yeah.
Um, I know you well enough to know you wouldn't have pursued the nomination in the first place just to become a token candidate. So, just in a few sentences, why did this matter so much to you
Well,
to do?
we were in it to win it. I will just tell you that. It was not a situation where I went into this thinking, okay, I'm going to lose and I'll just try to get my message out there. I ran to win. And, you realize that's a very tough thing to do just based on the demographics. I think this district breaks down to be like an R12, which means it leans Republican by 12 percentage points. Obviously, there's a lot of votes among people who are unaffiliated. In the primary, I captured 70% of those votes, people who were unaffiliated. And so that's why I basically walked away with the primary. But the message that we really wanted to get out there was talk about the inequities in North Carolina. And North Carolina, unfortunately, has been used as a sort of a test lab for some of the cruelest policies you can think of. The Koch brothers have been heavily involved in North Carolina politics. They have convinced the General Assembly to cut unemployment benefits. They have encouraged them to cut people's Medicaid benefits. Even things, conservative ideas like the earned income tax credit, which is great for lifting people up out of poverty. They have convinced the General Assembly that that is a bad idea, and that is a Ronald Reagan idea. Just to show you how far right the state has gone and the influence that some of these really horribly corrupt influencers have on our state's politics. So I wanted to expose that. My opponent, matter of fact, had taken a lot of money uh, from a guy named Ron Cameron, and he's just a real bad dude. He runs chicken processing plants, uh, employs a lot of minimum wage workers, people who are here perhaps on a basis that is less than legal. And he actually paid $250,000 to various legislative candidates so that they would insert language that protected his business against any kind of COVID issues. So if you worked in one of his plants and you got sick with COVID, you could not sue despite the fact that he was taking zero precautions. And if you work in one of these chicken processing plants, you're working elbow to elbow with people. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to maintain any kind of social distancing or anything like that, and to pay so that you can basically abuse a system and abuse your employees and things like that. Pretty disgusting.
So, just speaking for me, I'm not sure. I consider myself um, less politically minded compared to other times in my life right now. But I am very dejected about the political landscape in the United States. True moderates, in my opinion, are largely voiceless right now and have been for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. Um, I know, Brian, you're a common sense guy, and I'd love to know if and when you encounter someone like me on the campaign trail, I'm sure that you did. What do you say to that person to convince them that there's still hope to reach common political ground in this country? If you look at them in the eye and say, turn off Sean Hannity and turn off Rachel Maddow, pretend they don't exist because this over here, this is actually how we get there. What is this? What is that thing?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, I think there's a ton of space in the middle for moderates, and I consider myself to be probably center left. Having had past conversations about politics with you, I would say you're probably center right. But still, I think most people find themselves in the political center. And there's a lot of confusion because everything you hear comes from the left or the right. And that's what gets the most airtime right now. And it's frustrating. And so one of the things that I did, and I'll tell you about an experience I had during early voting during the primaries. In North Carolina, if you're an unaffiliated voter, you can vote either for the Democratic ticket or for the Republican ticket. You can go in and tell them, this time I'm voting uh, Republican. I want to choose my candidates on the Republican side. Or you come back the next time and say, I want to vote on the Democratic ballot. So there are a lot of people, an increasing number of people who are unaffiliated. And that doesn't mean that they're in the middle necessarily. It just means that they want to have that option of voting on either ballot. And one guy that I ran into at early voting, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, you're a candidate?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, I have never voted before. He said, I'm unaffiliated, but I really don't know which direction to go. Actually, you know what? He told me he had voted once. He told me he voted for Donald Trump and nobody else in 2016. He said, I thought he represented guys like me, and it turns out that I think I got fooled. He said, what do you, tell me what I should do? And I said, well, let me just tell you, just standing here talking to you, let me, let me, let me ask you a few questions. And I asked him where he worked, and he told me that he really didn't have a full-time job, and he had done construction work and gotten hurt on the job. And I said, well, do you have Medicaid? And he said, no, I would love to, but I can't earn enough to be in the marketplace, and I earn a little bit mowing yards and stuff like that. And he said, so I'm in that gap where I don't have medical insurance. And I said, well, you need to get in there and pull a Democratic ballot and vote for every Democrat you can find. I said, because Democrats actually care about you. Now, I'm not going to say that Republicans don't, but I will tell you that Republicans are a whole lot more interested in who's going to grease their palms, especially in a state where they already have the power and they don't have to worry about, small fry like me or you. I said, so, that's really, I think, what you should be focused on is who's got your interests and your benefit in mind. And I just, in a state where Republicans hold all the power and all the cards, you have to start looking for alternatives. And so he did. He went in and he came out and said, "Hey, I voted for you and I pulled the Democratic ballot." But I think getting that message out there to people, to stop thinking along party lines and, oh, I am a Republican, therefore I'm going to vote for Republicans, or I'm a Democrat, therefore I'm going to vote for Democrats, or I like this guy because he was on a TV show, or I like this guy because he was best friends with a black guy. I think we have to get away from that kind of identity politics and get more towards people understanding which party or very specifically which candidate is going to be looking out for their best interest.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And you're right. I probably am a little bit right of center socially. I'm certainly left of center on a lot of environmental issues.
Mm-hmm.
It just there's not a lot of conversation to be had down that center aisle right now. And when you look left and you look right, and everyone is not everyone. That's a being too dramatic, but too many are so far left or so far right that it's to me, as someone who is more of a moderate, it's just so unrelatable, and it's very disheartening. And I wonder, Mike, of course you're a northerner, there in the land of igloos, as we like to say.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know what you guys look down here and wonder sometimes when you see, I mean, things happening on both sides of the aisle. It has to look like complete and utter nonsense.
We watch U.S. News for comedy programming at this point. It's it's almost sad, honestly, what's happened. I'm a bit of a political junkie, to be honest. When I went to school, it was politics and economics. I, by American standards, politically, I would be a lefty. People would call me a lefty by American standards. What amazes me is I watched a couple of the Democratic primary debates, and at one point, they asked the question of who here is against providing single payer health care to illegal immigrants. I think that was the exact wording of the question. And every person on that stage raised their hand and said they would be for that. And I'm watching this and I'm like, at what point did the Democrats go left of Canada? Because that would be considered a way left position up here, and Justin Trudeau would be thrown out of power if he ever said something like that. And I'm like, that's strange. But we look at the Republicans and think they're insane. And it's like, so basically, the voters in America are being given the option of the most crazy people on the left running the Democratic Party, the most crazy people on the right running, well, in charge of the other party. It's like, these don't seem like really attractive options for anybody. And you have to pick one of these two. And that's always kind of frightened me a little bit. Like, to be honest, the people that I liked on the Democrat side were Klobuchar. I thought Amy Klobuchar was really good. I liked Tulsi Gabbard. I thought Joe Biden was all right. I didn't like anybody else on that stage. And again, I would be considered a lefty by American standards, and I barely liked anybody on that stage. And there wasn't anybody on stage for the Republicans that I ever liked. And I'm like, I can only imagine what the American voter goes through every 4 years when they're given the options that they're given. And I still remember being in Niagara Falls, New York, during the 2016 election. And this was right before your vote there. And I was at a bar, and this older gentleman looked at me and said, "I assume you're Canadian, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I had a Canada sweatshirt and a leaf hat on or something." And he asked me what our prime minister was like. And I said, "Well, he's kind of boring and competent." And he turns around to me and says, "Boring and competent would get 80% of the vote right now." And I just started laughing. We're dying for boring and competent right about now. And honestly, I think that's kind of why Biden won. I think there's enough people that just kind of think he's boring and competent. And to be honest, after the 4 year show that you guys have had, I can see why he won the last election.
Did
Yeah,
I ever
well, I
tell you
just
guys?
go
Sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to make a comment real quick. Did I ever tell you guys about the smartest couple that I have met in the last 4 or 5 years?
You have not?
I
I'm
don't think so.
guessing not. Okay. Um, right after the 2016 election, my family went to London, and then we spent a few days in Paris. Just like a 9 day trip, just jet over there, see everything we can see as quick as we can, and then zip back home. Well, one of the nights that we were in London, we went into a pub and we're sitting there having dinner, and typical fish and chips and beer and that sort of thing. And this couple from a nearby table they said, "Hey, you guys are Americans. We hear your accent. Do you mind if we come sit with you?" And we're like, "Sure, come on." And come to find out, this guy and his wife, they were from New Jersey, and my wife being from New York, so there was like that immediate, connection. And so we're having a really nice conversation with these people, and we said, "Where are you guys going? Are you just hanging out here? Are when do you go back home?" And they said, "Well, we're not going back home. Uh, Matter of fact, we're moving to Spain." And I said, "Wow, moving to Spain, that's got to be a big life decision." And the guy said, "Well, actually," he said, "I owned a construction company in New Jersey, and we had dealings with Donald Trump, and the guy jammed me for about $800,000." And he said, "So when that guy got elected, I decided I'm folding everything up, I'm selling everything I own, and we're moving to Spain." And there's been so many times over the last 4 years when I've thought about this couple and thought, those people were so freaking smart because they haven't had to put up with any of this. American news does not dominate the airwaves in Europe the same way it does here. I'm like, all of the stresses and like the PTSD that I have felt over the last 4 years, they haven't had to deal with any of that stuff. I mean, these people are brilliant in my mind. But anyway,
Yeah.
not to digress too much, but I think about those folks often.
Well, it's just very disheartening to me that more emphasis seems to be placed now on just being right and trying to
Yeah,
prove
right.
that you're right on a particular issue than just respecting each other and recognizing that different backgrounds, different upbringings, different walks of life result in different points of view.
Hmm.
And there is no black and white. We're talking about very gray issues, and this happens from both directions constantly, right and left. I mean, there's no, there is no, one sect is throwing darts and the other is just absorbing those darts. I mean, it's a crossfire, very much so, of that kind of disrespect. And I just look at the BDL, and we have always had such a wide collection of people of varying viewpoints politically, socially, um, you know, just across the board. And, that hasn't stopped us from getting along, getting together in
Oh, sure.
person,
Right.
and just embracing each other as human beings,
Of
and
course.
bonding over something common like baseball. That that bridge of commonality, though, it's just so much now. If you just open your Twitter feed, you get all these verified accounts, no disrespect, Brian, all these verified Twitter accounts that are just encouraging that base to burn that bridge,
Yep.
just burn it, set it on
Right.
fire. And I think that is so incredibly sad, and it puts us on a very, very dangerous path in this country and internationally. um, and it makes me really fear, for the country, the environment that my children are going to inherit.
Well, I think it really speaks to what a special group we have in the BDL when you just consider, the last couple of weeks. I mean, we're just getting ready to kick off the draft, and that's obviously kind of a high stress time for everybody because you've done all your research and now it's go time, right? And we had a couple of medical emergencies in the league, and I think to every last person, everybody basically said, let's hit pause until folks are ready and they have their family situation straightened out because nobody wants to like push somebody to be making decisions or lose their picks or whatever it is. Let's just all just like take a breath. Baseball doesn't start for a while. Let's let people get their loved ones out of the hospital, and we'll, if it takes a couple of weeks, we'll come back to it. And I was just so impressed with everybody's response to that because it really was the right thing to do.
I agree. I think we've seen this spring or this winter. Um, there are things we can do differently with the draft going forward. We didn't put any single pick. We didn't even start the clock this year,
Right,
and it
right.
we worked beautifully.
It did.
So I was very impressed by that, just for the group as a whole, and kind of shifting back a little more to BDL matters. Brian, we cannot get together on the same show and not discuss, at least in passing, the greatest BDL championship series of all time,
Oh my
which of
God.
course was your 2014 loss to the Generals.
Yes.
Have to throw that in there. But just to steer that toward recent more recent events, that was your second consecutive final appearance after winning the whole thing the year before.
Yeah.
Why haven't you been back?
Well, and I go back to, 2006 was my first year in the league. And I've had some really good teams and I've had some really bad teams. And typically what happens with me is, and I don't want to compare myself too closely to Joe because I know in some ways he is this way too. But I will get to the point where I don't like my roster for whatever reason. It's the players or their ages, or there's something about my roster that I just like, man, I just don't dig this team anymore. And so I'll blow them up. And that, I think, is the process I've been going through for the basically since my last championship, and basically since our last finals appearance together. I've been sort of trying to rework my team to the point where I have a lot of young stars on the hitting side and enough good high upside pitching and prospects on the pitching side to feel good about my chances going forward. And back then when I had guys like Carlos Lee and players like that who were just hitting it at high levels. I mean, obviously that's not going to last forever, but yeah, that 2012, 13, and 14, those were the glory days in Crawford for sure. We'll get back there. And next time we hope to beat you on the last day, because that's what it came. I think it came down to. Tell me if I'm remembering this incorrectly. I mean, we were like sweating bullets at the end of the day on Sunday.
So
It was that close.
it was that close, and it's been what, 7 seasons now or so. So I could be getting this a little bit turned around after all this time, but this is the close version. So you sat your, what was it, your entire rotation, your active pitchers for that Sunday to preserve. I would have to go back and look. I assume to preserve your averaged stats,
Yeah,
ERA, WHIP,
ratios. Yep.
and about midday, Jonathan Papelbon looked like he had blown the entire series for me, and I nearly cut him from my roster on that Sunday. Um, then it did come down to the last game. It came down to the ninth inning. It might have come down to the last at bat. I would have to. We could go back and look at this, but anyway,
Yeah,
it was a bloop single or double by Derek Jeter in the ninth inning. That. Now I think I was already just barely ahead at that point, but that bloop hit by
that
Jeter sealed the matchup in the
that
ninth
sounds
inning.
familiar. It
Um,
was
yeah.
disgusting.
Oh man, if I had lost that, I think I might have quit. I'm not sure,
So that's
but
why I have this incredible hatred for Derek Jeter. I just remembered.
but I bring that up a little bit just to point out for context too. We talk a lot about how difficult it is to win a championship in the BDL. It's also very different difficult just to advance to the BDL finals. And if my quick look at statistics is correct, I think that's only happened 4 times in league history. The Falcons did it, the Damage did it twice, and your 13-14 Cramps did it, back-to-back finals appearances. Hope I'm not maybe overlooking one
It
instance there,
is.
but I think just the 4. So it was a very impressive feat, and it was a great team, and
When you think
and
about it, it's like running a gauntlet. I mean, it's hard enough getting to the playoffs, right? And putting yourself in a good position as you enter the playoffs, having a healthy team entering the playoffs, and then you have to win 3 games in a row, which is
yeah,
hard enough to do during the regular seasons, but now you're playing against the best competition BDL has to offer. And at some point, it just becomes luck. I remember I think, I won it in 2013. I think, I think my 14 team was better. I was also in the finals and got knocked out by, by Brent. And I just remember thinking, I think you got knocked out at the same time that I did, and we were looking forwards to a matchup against each other. And by midweek, it was clear that neither I was going to win or you.
You have to be referring to the 2012
Yeah, it'd be 2012. Yeah,
playoffs. The Generals were the regular season champions that year, and yeah, Chris, the Beers knocked me out in the semifinals. It was not a good time in my house.
and you almost have to laugh because it's just,
Oh, we laughed. We all
yeah,
laughed.
you. I mean, honestly, you just like, all right, I've worked so hard to put together this team. I've made so many trades to put myself in the right position, and it's just like the lady luck is not with you this time around. I mean, you've lost. You're halfway through. There's no way you can make these numbers up, and it's just you got to tip your cap and say, Brent had the better team this week. That's all. That's all it is.
Wallabies.
I don't think Scotty was that nice about it. I don't think it was like, yeah, he has a better team this week.
That remains. I
don't think those words were ever spoken. Yeah.
No, that remains my stolen trophy. That is my stolen BDL trophy.
I view it the same way. I was looking so forward to the Generals and the Cramps finally meeting up in the finals. Of course, we did the following year, but it was, or the year after maybe, but it was, it was something I had looked forward to for a very long time, and I'm just like, Brent, what are you gonna do?
Well, the matchup, I know it didn't go your way, but it lived up to the hype in any case. But Mike, tell us a little bit about the 2021 outlook for the Crawford Cramps.
Yeah, the 2021 Cramps are a really interesting team. They might have the best batting lineup in the BDL. If not the best, they're certainly one of the best. But they're currently running with basically a no-man bench. So, Brian, is that something you plan on doing during the season based on the number of stars you have in your lineup? Do you plan on just using all of your bench depth to augment your pitching, or is it something going to be changing, you think?
I think as we, well, I'm hoping as we emerge from spring training that a couple of my guys from the minors will be promoted, and I'll be able to keep those guys on the bench because I really do think that you everybody knows you're going to run into days off. You're going to run into rainouts and things like that. You need to have some flexibility there where you can plug in guys because let's face it, so many of these matchups come down to losing one category or two categories by one or two runs or an RBI or a home run or whatever. And so wherever you can fill spots, you need to do that. So I'm aware of that, weakness on my team right now. I made a trade last week. It was kind of a need-based trade. I potentially overpaid just a little bit, but I needed to get some starters into my outfield, and I picked up a pitcher that I like, Herman Marquez from the Rockies, and so I'm hoping that things will shake out by the end of spring training, and then if I need to, I'll make some deals to add some bench depth.
Sounds good. So, as was discussed, the Cramps were champs in 2013. Since then, you've had a surprisingly bad run. Despite having Trout on your roster, I think since 16, the Cramps over the last 4 seasons have only, I think, cracked 500 once in 2017. So you're basically like the
wasting
Angels,
his prime.
pretty much
He's
like
wasting
the Angels,
his prime.
Yes, pretty much like the Angels of the BDL. Is this just the worst luck in BDL history? Was there something wrong with how you had those teams set up? Like, can you look back and have a feel for what went wrong on those clubs?
I think it comes down to a lack of pitching depth, plus the fact that Mike Trout is obviously an albatross and bad luck for anyone who has him. So I'm willing to send him out of town right now for a bag of baseballs.
Yep, I'll send the offer right now. Hold on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Done. Signed off on. No, I like having him on my team. He's just so dependable. You know he's going to get his stats each and every week. I think I've had really good depth on the hitting side and good players on the hitting side throughout. It's been pitching that I've had some very poor luck with, and so I think when you think about the teams that have been successful, they've had a better balance than I've had the last few years. So
Yeah.
Pitching, and it's when I say bad luck, I mean mainly talking about health. I've had a lot of pitchers that they just get hurt. I mean, Noah Syndergaard is a perfect example of a guy he throws hard, he throws a lot of sliders, and that's great. Except when he gets hurt, he's off your roster for a year and a half or so. And so he's a guy I traded. I had very little faith in, and probably this year I'll wish I had him back, but I tend to lose patience with those guys when they're not producing. And I think as we move forward, I'm going to try to exercise more patience with my pitching staff, and I'm going to try to accumulate more pitchers as we go forward. There have been a lot of weeks where I've been just playing for ratios.
Yeah.
Especially, well, you have to do that against some teams, and we'll maybe talk about those later. But just trying to hit the pitching minimums and play for two categories, and then try to sweep the hitting categories. I've been doing that a lot over the last few years, and I'd like to get away from that.
Yeah. In the past, when your teams were kind of championship contenders, you always seem to have the whole 2 or 3 A strategy,
Yeah.
which would do well in wins and obviously do well in ERA and WHIP. But I remember back in the day, you would have you had Kershaw on your team, you had Verlander, you had Strasburg, and then basically you had those 2 or 3 guys, and then beyond that, it really didn't matter if those guys are rolling. You were probably going to do pretty well on the pitching side.
Yep.
So speaking of the 2021 season, coming into the season, I think the thought is the Cramps are gonna contend in the West. Going into the season, can you rank the 4 teams in your division coming in?
Oh wow. That's interesting. I hadn't even thought about it really. I will say Ort, he's just always got to be considered at or near the top. I think the Cramps are going to do well this year. The Woo are on the upswing. The Lions. I mean, he's proven to be a very good owner, and I kind of mentally I just kind of rank us all evenly. It's going to be really interesting to see how things shake out and who is willing to go out there and make a big deal to bring in that extra piece that's going to get them over the top. I think my team clearly has the best hitting of that group. Or is always going to have the most pitching. He might not have the best pitching, but he's just going to overwhelm you with numbers. And then the other two guys they're going to be in it too. They've got a lot of young players who are coming up, and they've made some interesting trades to bring in some pieces they need. So I think it's a kind of a toss up at this point.
So this may be a good question for you, since me and Scott obviously has been in the league for a long time. I think it was a former U.S. president that once said, "Those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future." I can't remember if that was Kennedy or Trump.
John Kennedy.
Oh, it was Kennedy. Okay, yeah. I always get those two mistaken in my mind.
I think Trump's most famous line is grab him by the pussy.
Okay. Yeah. Which to be honest was also something Kennedy may have said back in the day as well. Now, is this
See, we're all the same. We're all the same.
Is this something you think the BDL owners are often guilty of kind of just looking at the present and not giving enough consideration of the future of the club?
I think some owners probably, and I think there are other owners, and a few names spring to mind who are they look at prospects and they tend to overvalue them so much that it can make it difficult to trade because they're overvaluing their own prospects and they're devaluing yours, And so anytime you're talking about trading minors, unless it's a challenge trade with only major leaguers, it becomes very difficult. So I think you're right. I think I'm probably guilty of over the last couple of years I've been looking towards the future a little bit too much, and this year I'm going to definitely be looking to contend.
Sounds good. I'd like to play a little game with you and perhaps Scotty as well. I'm going to throw out a team name, and can you give me the first thought that pops in your head?
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right.
Yikes.
We're going to start easy.
Wait, who goes first?
We will flip-flop. Okay, so first one will be for Brian. The Amish Brotherhood.
The Amish. First thing that pops into my head is hungry. I think Joe he is just about starved to have a championship in the BDL. So that's my word for him. I think he's very anxious to contend and to win.
Does it have to be one word?
No, it doesn't have
phrase, I guess. Right?
Obviously not. The politician just took about a half hour to answer that. So good.
Yeah, you did. I'm guilty.
Let's see. Well, in regards to his other league, I would say big fish, small pond. In regards to the BDL, I would say little fish, big pond.
Okay, Scotty, for you first. The Killer Cards of Anaheim.
This is not fair.
No, it's not. It's not. And that one was on purpose.
I can't wait.
I can't. I'm not. Listen, I'm not going to throw my old partner under the bus, so I'm going to say overdue.
That he is.
Wow. Okay. I'll make a reference to The Office, everybody's favorite television program. Little Kid Lover. He is obsessed with minor league players.
Yeah, he is. And it's good.
Sorry, Johnny.
It is good you clarified that, Brian. It's really good you clarified that. All right. Next one for Brian. Let's go with the Grays View Lions.
Oh, the Lions. So Alex, yeah. I think he's just going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think a lot of people have underestimated him to this point. So that's my take on him.
I would say energy. I think Alex has a lot of energy. I don't know. We all know how long it can take to build a successful club in the BDL. It takes a lot of perseverance and multiple seasons sometimes, unless I guess you're Matt Eddy. But yeah, Alex I think has a lot. He's shown a lot of energy in our conversation with him in the last episode of the Inside Pod. I was very impressed by that energy.
All right, Scott, let's go with the Boston Double Downs.
I would say the Double Downs. I would call the Double Downs. First thing that comes to mind would be some kind of pest. Because Kevin's not the most vocal guy, and you don't always know he's there, but he's always there, swarming around your head. He is waiting. The team is always pretty good to contender. He's on the edge of the playoffs, or he's or they're a playoff contender. So they're just always around. They're always pesky and pesty. But you don't know it sometimes until it's too late.
Yeah, I have a very hard time beating Kevin. for whatever reason, the double downs just seem to constantly have my number or make me so crazy in the weeks that I have to play them that it just drives me crazy. But the word that really pops into my brain when I think about Kevin is that he's got a little bit of the same weakness that I do. I like Atlanta Braves players. That's my team. I watch them. But he likes his Boston players. So he's a little bit of a homer.
Let's go with the Wallabies, Brent's club.
Whose turn is it? Is it me?
Yeah, you, Brian. Sorry, Brian.
Oh, Portsmouth. Where's Waldo?
That's about right.
Thief.
Stolen title.
Yes. Oh God, yeah, I know. I swear to God, that week. You could think back years, and I'm just like, he just killed me that week. And I thought my team was so much better than his. That's what made it so frustrating.
Okay, I get Scotty's up first in the next one. Let's get someone in this division. Let's go with the Memphis Chicks.
Delusions of grandeur.
Yeah, I wrote down confident with the minute you said his name, because he is very confident in his team. So I do not share his confidence, but I do admire his energy and his enthusiasm.
Okay, let's get a good one for Brian. How about the NorCal Damage?
Bill.
He is the manager of the club. Yes. Do you have any comments on the club? Yes.
I think that first of all, I would like to see their incorporation papers because I do not believe that they are in fact incorporated. I think there's a little bit of a lie that's been told on us the last few years, but Bill is the ultimate competitor. I can't think of the NorCal Damage without thinking Bill. His personality just kind of infuses that club. To the type of players that he drafts and trades for, down to the way he plays the game. He's tough.
Yeah, I mean this one is so easy. It's almost uninteresting. To me, it's just consistency. Bill is so consistent. In all ways. Yeah. I mean, what else can you say? I mean, they're the BDL's one and only true dynasty. Just consistent.
It's like a pirate ship with a very mean, bad pirate on it at all times.
It's not bad. Scotty, the Carolina Cardinals.
Did we have to start with me on this one?
Yeah, we do.
I don't know if I should say this or not.
Then say it.
I think I've made this comment privately to one or two guys over the last year or so. My opinion here is not too off base. In my opinion of Bill and his damage consistency, but more specifically to the Cardinals, to Matt, I would say Matt is sort of the polite Bill.
I can see that.
He's the Bill's personality. He and I mean this with no disrespect, Bill. Probably not unlike myself. He's kind of easy to want to beat, easy to almost hate from a competitive point of view. Matt takes a different approach. The quality of his team builds is impeccable. He's a wonderful competitor. He just goes about it from a much more polite posture. He's sort of the polite Bill to me.
Yeah, the first word that pops into my mind is is smart. I really
Yeah.
think, among the folks in the league, there are folks who you kind of consider your equals, and then there are the people that every time you start talking trade with them, you start to get the impression that, okay, they're way fucking smarter than I am. What what am I walking into here? There's some sort of swinging sword, and I don't see it. So yeah, he's wicked smart.
Who's up for? I think Brian's up for. Let's go with the Woo of the West, John's Club.
The Woo youth movement. They clearly made the decision a few seasons back to sort of just like tank and play for draft picks and to trade for very young players, and I think very much like some Cramps teams of the past, it's going to be interesting to see if John can start to leverage that, whether he's willing to turn loose of some of those young guys and trade for maybe some stars that could put him in contention. His team looks pretty good right now, but I don't think he's a contender unless he flips that switch.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, I would just say patience is what I think of when I think of Wrigleyville. John is very good and is okay with playing the long game, and most most owners I don't think can do that and do it well.
Yeah,
Impatience really starts to set in, and you start to make bad decisions. Now, on the flip side of that, maybe John waits too long sometimes to make moves that he should be making, but more often than not, if you play your cards right, you don't make boneheaded moves too quickly to try to compete when you're really not ready. I think that's where John slots in his woo. He's smart in that way to not pull that trigger too quickly.
I will say, if he pushes his chips to the middle of the table, the West gets really interesting.
Right. Yeah. His situation right now reminds me a lot of the late 2011 Generals. You know, I was the worst. The Generals were the worst team in the league, if I remember correctly, in 2011. I think that's when we flipped a switch and went from worst to first
Yeah,
in one
right.
off season. And John, the Woo, um, they're capable. I don't know that they could pull off a jump quite that large, but he could make some serious noise if he chose to.
Let's go with the Chula Vista Vipers. Scotty, you're up first.
It's been tough. Have not had a lot of time to get to know Michael that much yet. With the COVID season, and of course the Vipers took over for the Rebels, so that kind of has a special place in my heart there. So I would just say, I'm watching them closely and wish them well. And from what we've seen so far, I think the Vipers will live up to the task.
Yeah, my first, I really kind of, rather than a word, I think I get an image of maybe like a record or something that just like headed up the charts with a bullet. I think he's got the right idea of how to compete in this league, and I think that he's going to be really good faster than a lot of us think. And I loved your dad, Scotty. I mean, he used to very playfully call me the communist in the league.
It wasn't playfully.
I can't believe I didn't get that nickname. Come to think of it,
his team was very staid and sort of he had his guys that he liked, and he would not turn them loose in any kind of trade
mm-hmm.
discussion. And Michael is not that way. He will flip that switch and trade a player. He knows what he wants to
Yeah.
do, and not a criticism or what have you of either way of thinking is valid. But he is running and gunning, and it's kind of fun to see.
I don't know how much contact you've had with Steven, but let's go with our newest team, the Moncton Mounties.
Hmm. My sense of him is he's very methodical in his approach.
He's an
Um,
accountant, so it makes sense.
yeah, it's I found him. very willing to engage in trade talks so far. We haven't gotten anything done yet. I think he really examines the value of his players and weighs everything very carefully, and he's very cautious. But I have a sense he's going to be a guy that is going to be, well, clearly he already is a great addition to the league, but as time goes on and he begins to get more comfortable, he's going to be scary.
Yeah, I don't have a great sense of Steven yet. We've not talked trade to this point.
I warned him not to do that, Scotty. So that's probably part of the
Yeah,
reason. Yeah.
I I guess just so far I would say kind of in the same vein as Alex. I think he's been a great new addition in terms of the forum. Injecting new blood into the forum and the level of activity that we're seeing there, specifically this off season. He's not afraid to jump in and start to get to know everyone and really weigh in on news and talk about things, and that has been very much needed in the league. Having a few of our older now long gone personalities replaced with owners who are as active as they were. And I think just my early take on Steven is that he seems to fit that mold.
My mental image of him so far, and I can't escape this. I need to see an actual picture of him because I picture him as an actual Canadian Mountie.
I can send you a photo if you want. Scotty, Kill Devil Hill is the elevation.
Oh, man. The one that got away. Yeah, I almost hated to whip Ort's rear end in 2017. I think he thought he had that championship teed up and was going to smack that ball 400 yards, but darn, those generals just got in his way. So, yeah. He's another one. I kind of go back to what I said about Johnny overdue. Ort, a real mark of consistency in the league, and not the biggest prospects guy. Although I just managed to send him a small handful of prospects in a trade, which was wild to me. But I'm glad we were able to get that done. But yeah,
I'll go with tidal wave. Because, and I'll tell the truth here, because going back to when Ort's team was the Billy Goats, I have had a real hard time beating his club. I don't know what it is. He's got my number for some reason, but every time you match up against him, it's like you look at the sheer number of pitchers that you're going to face that week, and it's like, okay, I know I can't compete in the counting stats. So, I'm going to get this just deluge of pitching. So maybe I just should shoot for the ratios and try to beat him with hitting.
Yeah, and Ort's really it's or the elevation, I should say, one of those clubs in the league. If we were to have the conversation, predict the future. What do you think the playoffs in 2035 will look like if any of us are still alive at that time? Well, I would easily say, well, probably pencil in the damage, probably pencil in the Rockets. Got to give Mike some due there, and probably pencil in the elevation.
Yeah, it's consistent.
Any combination of the other clubs in the league could be in the process of reloading, rebuilding, just down. Really, and you might even throw the double downs in that group too, possibly. They're just there. I mean, they're really you don't expect to see a BDL playoff without that small handful of teams, and the elevation are included in that group.
Yeah, I agree. They're just always kind of there. I mean, I look at sometimes, we'll be talking trade, and I'll be looking at his roster. I'm like, none of these guys really appeal to me, and yet somehow he has a way of getting just maximum. I don't know if it's career years out of all of his guys at the same time or what it is, but I mean, you match up against him, you've got a handful, and being in the same division as him, it's tough.
What's tough playing against the guy when you're playing 8 categories and he's playing 10. And that's
Yeah,
basically the way you got to go in against him, knowing Kazin
yeah,
wins, he's probably taken, and you got to win 5 of the other 8. Makes it a little hard.
that's right. And
Uh,
usually saves too.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I think we're down to a final 4. Scotty's first for their Malibu Bay beers.
Lightning Rod. The beers and their illustrious owner, they sure know how to elicit opinions. Do they not?
They do, yeah. I think of Chris as being the man with the plan. I mean, he's definitely always got an idea for how he wants his team to shake out. And it's like there are multiple curtains, and behind which curtain you don't know what trade is happening. And he always seems to come out with great, great trades for his side.
You know why I think that is, Brian. I think most of our and this is not an indictment of obviously of the quality of our membership. I think a lot of this is just human nature, and you're when you're in a heated division rivalry, you're reacting very often to what's happening around you, and a lot of our owners are reactive, to
Sure.
league trends, trying to just keep up with the Joneses, keep pace, keep championship pace. Um, I think Chris and frankly Mike, you as well, to a large degree, are very proactive. Looking at making a move that maybe 3 moves later is recognized for being as smart as it was back then.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
Chris actually the way he runs his team reminds me a lot of the way I run my team.
You're
They're
very
very
similar.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
sometimes I get the feeling that you guys are playing chess and the rest of us are playing checkers.
I won't go that far, but yeah. uh, okay, we got 3 teams left. Let's go to everybody's favorite team, the Rockland Rockets.
The Rockets. Man, when I look at your squad, Mike, I just think that you are always loaded. I mean, your team just pitching, hitting. I very seldom see an area where it's like, wow, that's a definite weakness. Mike needs to think about addressing that. I never see it when I look at your team.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, I mean, the word that comes to my mind is exhausting. It makes me exhausted to analyze the Rockets roster because just the amount of work that it takes to maintain that level of quality and never rebuild. The Rockets never rebuild; they only reload. That is exhausting, and I mean that with the utmost respect. It's just to be able to do that year in and year out is very impressive.
It's that
Okay,
smooth Canadian attitude.
that's what it is. Okay, 2 clubs left. I won't have you weigh in on your own. So, Scotty, tell me what you think of the Crawford Cramps.
Oh wow.
Now, be nice. He's our guest.
Not necessary.
No, I
Let me
mean,
have it. I'm used to it.
what do you say? The Cramps. They came in. What was it, Brian? Late 06, or was it
Oh six,
mid
yeah.
06,
Hmm.
something like that? Yeah, and sort of assess the landscape of things and put a plan in place that it kind of going back to how we were describing John. It was a long term plan. It took, what was it, 3-4 seasons probably for it to really take hold. But since that time, since that, around that 2012ish season, um, the Cramps really have been among the gold standard clubs in the BDL. You can just rattle off 3 or 4 or 5 clubs over the last decade that if that were the window of the league and the only window, and we were writing a history of the league, um, and creating a Hall of Fame for the league, across that period of time, you would have just those few clubs that would rise to the top. In terms of the ones everyone would remember, and the Cramps are right there. They're right there in that conversation. Gold standard.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Generals too, I probably be repeating a little bit of what you said, but the Generals are definitely a winning ball club, and you look at the history of that team, and they are always at or near the top of the standings. They are always in the mix for championships, unless he's in the middle of a rebuild, which has happened once or twice over the course of time. But the other thing is, I can't think of Scotty without thinking of a league commissioner who really just has a steady hand on the tiller. And I think as somebody who has been a part of leagues that have fallen apart over time, and it hasn't always been pleasant, because a lot of times you invest a lot of your energy into a fantasy baseball league. The fact that this league consistently has had great owners, and we have had some folks who have come and gone, but we now have a group that I see being with us well into the future. And I think that's a credit to Scotty, but also to the excellence of teams like the Generals and like the Damage and the Cardinals, and just the teams that we consistently see being in the playoffs. Obviously the Rockets, but it says a lot to be a part of a league like this, and to have owners like this, and teams that you're always going to be threatened by every time you match up against them.
Appreciate that, Brian. Very nice words. Well,
exactly what you wrote,
I
Scotty.
think
Exactly what you wrote down for.
that's what I had down for myself as well, if it matters. But guys, I think we're at the end of the rope here today with Brian, Mr. Cramp himself. Brian, before you go, this spring we tend to ask all of our guests this question as we head into the new season. Do you have a championship prediction?
Do I have a championship prediction?
What is the team right now? What is the standout team to you? If you had to pick one.
Right now, in my mind, I look at the Rockets and I think they're just absolutely loaded.
I like this guy.
I think they're going to be tough to beat. I'm going to be very interested to see, whether a few of these other teams push their chips in and go for it. I'm approaching that mode myself. If I find the right opportunity, I'm going to go for it. I've got 10 of the top 100 minor league players, and they're available.
Well, then,
a not so subtle advertisement, everybody.
There you go.
I think I preferred having Alex on as a guest way more than me. He did pick the Generals, right?
Did he? Jeez.
Real quick hit. Who do you guys think had the best draft?
Oh, geez, I have to go back and look. Scotty,
we had a draft?
Yeah. I kind of tuned out after pick 2, at that point. I'd have to really go back and get a real deep dive. There were a bunch of teams, there were 2 or 3 teams in the first round that had a bunch of picks. So
yeah, I mean, I think just by that fact alone, you have to look at the Cramps as being high in that conversation. Crawford had what?
Crawford
pulling up the page
4, 5,
now.
6, right? Didn't
yeah, three of the top 6 picks.
Yeah.
So, and we all know, because we've been through this for so many years now. It's such a roll of the dice, and even your top choices don't always work out, or certainly not the way you maybe would hope. So, the round 1 threads over the years are littered with picks that pick pick 16 ended up being much more valuable than pick number 2. It's just the way this ball bounces. So, but I think volume matters, and that's an approach I have taken when I have rebuilt my clubs. Go for volume and spread your risk around. Something will hit. Something will hit if you have enough volume in the early rounds, and that is clearly an approach that Crawford took, and will more than likely pay off. Of course, you see NorCal there with several picks as well. I don't know. There's the poser with the number 1 pick, and
well, he got the best
Sun
player
Devil.
in the draft for sure.
We'll see.
I don't know about that.
We'll see, but that's a nice place to be. As far as myself, I got the players I wanted. Going into it.
I like your Veen pick a lot. I was actually surprised
Yeah,
he didn't go number 3. To be honest with you, I was expecting.
I was shocked. I thought for sure that he would. So I was prepared to take 2 pitchers instead of taking 2 hitters and a pitcher with the 3 picks. But going back and just kind of browsing over the draft over the last couple days, I thought the Vipers had a great draft. They picked up a lot of really quality pitching. The Cars had a surprisingly good draft. No, I'm serious. Honestly, look at the players he took. I mean, Emerson Hancock with his first pick, and goes from there. But the Chicks had a great draft, and the Cardinals are always going to have a good draft, but particularly so this time, I thought.
We'll see.
I do love the background compliments. Those are the best. He surprisingly didn't suck in this draft. I love those. I get those from
It'll
my
happen
wife.
for you one day, Johnny.
I get those from my wife all the time. Anytime I cook anything, this isn't horrible. Yeah, thanks for the compliment, sweetheart.
This isn't so bad.
Yeah, thanks. What the hell were you expecting?
Well, we're going to
Brian,
have.
It's been.
I was just going to say we're going to have. No, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Brian.
Go
ahead.
I was just going to say we're having an experiment in my house this week. My wife's going to be making meatloaf for the first time in 20 years.
See, it's good.
And well, the last time it was not great. So we're I have high expectations, and I've let her know this.
Now, Brian, we are recording this podcast on Valentine's Day. Don't push your luck, buddy. Don't push your luck tonight. Say it's great.
It has been an ongoing joke in my house really for the last 20 years because the last meatloaf came out like a meteorite. So
yikes.
Stacy's a great cook, but for whatever reason that meatloaf just did not turn out, and I have not been hot to partake of meatloaf since then. But this week we're going to give it another run.
Good deal. Well, good luck with that, sir.
Fingers crossed.
Brian, thanks you for joining the show today, bud. We really appreciate it, and we'll have to do it again.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Anytime.
All right, thank you.
Yep, take it easy.
Okay, Brian, thanks again for joining us and giving us that amount of time today here on the Inside Podcast. Really appreciate you hopping on the show to talk to us about what the last couple of years of your journey have looked like. Of course, Mike and I are both very much relieved that your opponent did win, but nevertheless, it was a great thing that you did for your community there, and wish you nothing but the best, sir. All right, looking forward to our next show, Mike. You guys, of course, everyone listening might have been expecting some draft coverage, or more than you got, rather. Of course, we talked about it a little bit with Brian earlier during this show, but due to the schedule of the draft, it kind of got delayed a little bit. We have pushed our draft coverage show to the end of this month, so you can expect that with another special guest toward the end of February. Looking forward to really dissecting what our 2021 draft looked like and we'll see where that goes and who gets the praise and who gets the insults, and it should be a good time.
It sure will. I'm not sure if you had any picks in that last draft. Did you have any picks, Scotty?
I had
Oh,
a
you had
whopping.
one, right?
I had two.
Ah,
Actually, I had more
you
like
picked Matt Moore. I remember that,
yeah,
which wasn't a bad
another
pick.
another pitcher from the Mets. I had 4 or 5, but ended up sending 2 or 3 of those picks away in trades prior to those rounds. So yeah, I ended up with two 5th-round picks. So wasn't much of a player in this year's draft, but looked for some potential rotation help for this season. We'll see how that plays out. But in any case, guys, thanks for listening. Again, we appreciate it so much, the support. Hey, again, we'd love to do a mailbag show here in the near future. So please feel free to PM your questions to Mike or myself or the both of us. We'll read them signed by you or unsigned, whatever you wish, and react to those questions. So send us what you got, and you'll hear it in an upcoming show. So, Mike, thanks again, bud, and I'll see you next time.
All right, buddy. See you soon.